Indiana Newsdesk is made possible in part by Smithville Fiber Internet, streaming TV, home security and automation in Southern Indiana. More information at smithville.com. MALLOR GRODNER attorneys providing legal services to clients and the community. Understanding, expertise, results. Bloomington and Indianapolis. LawMG.com. IU Alumni Association connecting IU's network of alumni and sharing the Indiana spirit through scholarships, advocacy, and volunteerism. Alumni.iu.edu. IU Center for Rural Engagement extending IU Bloomington resources to improve Hoosier lives in partnership with communities and organizations. Rural.indiana.edu. And by WTIU members. Thank you.
Coming up on Indiana Newsdesk. The end of 2020 has proven to be the deadliest season of the pandemic in Indiana.
The decision to postpone non-emergent hospital procedures reflects the fact that our hospital systems are stretched to the limit.
Ahead, the latest COVID numbers from across the state. Plus, a leader of IU Health joins us to talk about hospital capacity, staffing struggles, and the vaccine that could be administered to some folks as soon as next week. More utilities are continuing to transition away from coal, but as these plants close, communities are hit with job losses and a decline in tax revenue. In October, Coney Barrett became the second Hoosier appointed to the Supreme Court, but many people have trouble remembering the first. Coming up, Sherman Minton's impact on United States politics and the Supreme Court. Those stories, plus the latest news headlines from across the state, right now on Indiana Newsdesk. Welcome to Indiana Newsdesk. I'm Joe Wren. Well, it's possible COVID-19 could be the leading cause of death in Indiana this year. According to the most recent data available from the Centers for Disease Control, deaths from COVID-19 trail only cancer and heart disease as the leading killer of Hoosiers. The number of confirmed deaths from COVID is approaching 6,500. Now, in an open letter this week, healthcare workers pleaded with Hoosiers to help them fight the virus by wearing masks, social distancing, and getting the vaccine when it's available. Meanwhile, the state is ordering hospitals to postpone or reschedule non-emergency surgeries for the next few weeks.
The decision to postpone non-emergent hospital procedures reflects the fact that our hospital systems are stretched to the limit.
A new executive order from the governor also bars local health departments from waiving social gathering limits imposed by the state. So, for an instance, in counties experiencing the worst COVID spread, it's 25 people or less. In the second to worst category, orange, on the state's color-coded map, it's 50. The new restrictions come as Indiana's number of COVID-19 deaths and hospitalizations have spiked far past the state's peaks during the initial surge of the cases during the spring. Indiana officials say the state expects to get about 55,000 doses of a COVID-19 vaccine next week, with further amounts still unknown. Drug maker Pfizer expects to have its vaccine approved in the coming days. Healthcare workers and nursing home residents get top of the priority list, but the very first doses aren't enough to cover that entire population.
Because it is a smaller amount, that very first week, the invitation to get registered and get the vaccine is going directly to the hospitals across the state, and then we'll go to our long-term care staff.
Because initial supply is limited, Indiana was required to choose just 5 hospitals statewide that will get the dose first. Those are in Jeffersonville, Evansville, Indianapolis, Munster, and Fort Wayne. IU Health South Central Region Chief Medical Officer Dr. Daniel Handel joins us to talk about how the IU Health system is dealing with the pandemic. Doctor, thank you very much for being with us. Let's start with hospital capacities related to COVID-19. We've heard the Bloomington Hospital moving beds in conference rooms. What's the situation like there?
So actually, historically, Bloomington Hospital has actually had a higher number of licensed beds than we currently use. What we focus on now is actually the staffed beds, and we are actually turning some of the rooms that historically have been hospital rooms back into hospital rooms from being used as offices. So it is still within our licensed capacity for beds that we have at Bloomington Hospital, but given this most recent surge in COVID cases, we want to make sure that we're ready for every possible scenario.
How is the hospital staff coping with the increase in cases? Indiana, number 2 in the country. This was per capita new cases.
Right. They're tired. I mean, I think, we've been dealing with this since March, and the current spike we're going through is much worse than what we saw in the spring. So we're doing everything we can to support them. We're trying to bring in additional resources in terms of personnel to help backfill them and support them. And it's the quicker we can get through this, the better, because they're really stepping up to the plate, and I'm extremely proud of them. But it's been a long haul.
So Bloomington was not one of the first 5 hospitals to receive the first batch of vaccines. When do you expect Bloomington to get the vaccine, and then what's that plan going to be for distribution?
So we are hopeful that after the first wave that IU Health Bloomington Hospital will be the next group, which is looking approximately the week of December 31st that everything goes according to plan. But we're waiting for official approval from the state.
And if you had one, we just have a couple seconds, if you had one thing to tell people to help out right now, what would that be?
The vaccine can't come quick enough. We need people to continue to wear their masks, to stay at home and socially distance until we can get enough people vaccinated. Just because the vaccine is going to be available soon, it's not soon enough for people to let down their guards.
Okay, thank you very much, Doctor. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Take care.
Well, Thursday night, Brandon Bernard became the 9th condemned man to die by lethal injection since the Trump administration resumed federal executions this summer in Terre Haute. As Adam Pinsker reports, a 10th man is scheduled to be executed Friday.
Brandon Bernard spent more than half his life on federal death row. Bernard was convicted along with 4 other men of shooting and killing Todd and Stacy Bagley, then lighting their car on fire near Fort Hood, Texas. The Bagleys were youth ministers traveling through Texas when they were carjacked and shot to death by one of Bernard's co-defendants, Christopher Villalva.
The jurors should not have been able to attribute Villalva to Mr. Bernard's activities. Mr. Villalva was the leader.
Angela Moore was the federal government's attorney for the case at the appellate level. She now regrets sending Bernard to death row. She says during the trial, the prosecution suppressed evidence that showed Bernard wasn't at the scene when the Bagleys were shot.
If he lit the car on fire, let's say the court's correct on that, he thought he was destroying evidence. He wasn't killing anyone.
Although Bernard was in on the plan to carjack and rob the Bagleys, Moore says Bernard showed up after Villalva shot and killed the victims. Villalva then ordered Bernard to set the car on fire as the Bagleys were tied up in the trunk of their vehicle on federal property near Fort Hood. A medical examiner said Stacy Bagley was still alive when the car was set on fire. Villalva and Bernard were tried together in the case. Villalva was executed in September, and 2 of the 3 other men sentenced to prison for their role in the crime have been released. Gary McClung is one of several jurors who wishes he hadn't voted to give Bernard a death sentence.
Myself and another juror had some misgivings about the death penalty for Brandon Bernard, and the majority seemed to think that because he was there and things had gone as far as they did, that he would equally deserve the death penalty.
Alfred Bourgeois is also scheduled for execution here at the federal penitentiary. He was convicted in 2004 of murdering his 2.5-year-old daughter on a military base in Corpus Christi, Texas. Prosecutors say that he tortured the child after learning he would have to pay child support to the toddler's mother.
In 2002, the U.S. Supreme Court barred the execution of individuals with intellectual disability. Mr. Bourgeois is intellectually disabled under current standards. And in fact, the district court in Indiana ruled that we had made a strong showing that Mr. Bourgeois is intellectually disabled.
Bourgeois' attorney, Victor Abreu, says his client's IQ was tested twice, and the highest he scored was 75. Experts say 116 is considered an above-average score. Abreu says his client is intellectually disabled and his life should be spared.
As somebody who always struggled with things that we would consider simple things as kids, learning childhood games, managing money as an adult.
3 more executions are scheduled just days before President-elect Joe Biden is to be inaugurated. One of them, Lisa Montgomery, would be the first female federal death row prisoner executed since 1953. If these January executions go forward, more inmates will have been executed under the Trump administration than during the entire time period since the Great Depression. Death penalty advocates say many of these death row cases were resolved in the courts years ago, but previous administrations just failed to carry out the death sentences. Legal director of the Criminal Justice Legal Foundation, Kent Scheidinger, says if lawmakers have a problem with the federal death penalty, they can eliminate it.
It would only be wiped off the books if Congress repealed the law. As long as it is on the books, these cases should be pursued to their conclusion.
As a candidate, President-elect Biden said he would support abolishing capital punishment at the federal level. For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Adam Pinsker.
Well, when a coal plant shuts down, the loss of jobs and tax revenue can be devastating for the towns that host them. The state is grappling with how to help workers and local governments in Indiana with that transition. But activists say people who are harmed the most by the pollution and climate impacts from these plants need to be part of the conversation too. In the second story in our two-part series, Indiana Public Broadcasting's Rebecca Thiel looks at how the transition away from coal could play out in Michigan City, where NIPSCO plans to close its coal plant.
It's not always easy to see how something like pollution can affect your health. But for Michigan City resident Don Brooks, it's pretty clear. He has COPD, which stands for chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. It makes it difficult to breathe and can be life-threatening. Brooks says he was pretty active when he was younger, but now he can get winded just going up the stairs.
Because there is no hurry up, you get rushing, you run out of air.
People who live near things like coal plants, factories, and big cities are more likely to have heart and lung conditions like COPD. Brooks says for him, it could be other factors, like smoking. What he does know is that emissions from things like the NIPSCO coal plant impact his health right now. But residents like Brooks may breathe a little easier in 8 years. NIPSCO plans to close the Michigan City plant, remove its coal ash ponds, and get more than 60% of its energy from renewable sources. And it seems like Michigan City leaders are ready for a change too.
Hey, how you doing?
Councilman Michael Mack represents residents in the city's West Side neighborhood who live closest to the plant.
Born and raised here, went to high school.
On a walking tour of his district, he points out one of the many nonprofits in the city that help people experiencing homelessness.
We're a real microcosm of the city because we've got places like this, we've got some of the bigger industries in the city, and we've got NIPSCO.
He says the plant has been an iconic part of Michigan City, but it's time to move forward.
I think everybody's ready for it. I don't think there's very many people that would be standing up for let's burn coal right now.
Unlike other towns in Indiana, the closure in Michigan City isn't going to hit quite as hard. The plant is smaller, doesn't buy Indiana coal, and is in a much bigger city with more industries. It'll still mean losing high-paying jobs and more than $3 million in local and state tax revenues. But some local leaders see the closure as an opportunity.
We have one of the best views in Lake Michigan sitting right on that area, over 50 acres. So why not take advantage of that?
From where Clarence Hulse is standing at Washington Park, the coal plant looks out of place next to the city's own small slice of the lakefront, which among other things includes the public beach, a marina, a restaurant, and a zoo. Hulse says he could see some retail businesses or commercial offices where the plant is now.
I think it's a prime spot for people to live and work.
But activists worry that NIPSCO will still leave coal ash contamination behind, and it's possible that not everyone will benefit from this change. Ashley Williams is a co-founder of the group Just Transition Northwest Indiana. She says the people most harmed by pollution are often left out of these conversations. And that could lead to another polluter moving into the plant's place.
We want to see all of that stay here. We want to see that really thorough open dialogue with the community, not a behind closed doors sort of backroom deal for the coal plant where an investor comes in and just takes over the land and throws in, again, another injustice.
LaTanya Troutman is with the LaPorte County branch of the NAACP and another co-founder of the group. She says another concern is that other developments, like beachside resorts, could gentrify the area and exclude residents from the lakefront. Troutman says many people who live closest to the plant are lower-income residents and people of color, and they should be able to enjoy the land too.
We want the lakefront to be available to those residents, just like it's available to the residents who reside in Long Beach.
Troutman says the city needs to think about how people affected by pollution can be part of positive change going forward. Both Clarence Hulse and Michael Mack say the city has no plans to put an industrial building where the NIPSCO plant is now, and both want to keep the lakefront open to the public. But Hulse says after the plant closes, it could be a decade or more before the land is ready for new development. Mack says we could see a struggle between private industries and community leaders in the future, but those competing interests just haven't shown up yet.
So we just have to be smart, we have to be aware, and we have to make our input known on what we want as this process continues to go forward.
Indiana is in the middle of developing a statewide energy plan. Environmental justice advocates say it's important that the people most harmed by coal pollution and its impacts on the climate get a seat at the table. For Indiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Rebecca Thiel.
Coming up next on Indiana Newsdesk. When Amy Coney Barrett was seated on the Supreme Court last month, she became just the second justice from Indiana. Ahead, we take a look back at the first justice from the state, Sherman Minton. And Indiana's football game Saturday against Purdue was canceled due to a rising number of positive COVID-19 cases among the programs. Ahead, what that means for the Hoosiers. These stories and more right here on Indiana Newsdesk.
Stay close to Indiana Newsdesk as we trace education issues all the way from the Capitol to your child's classroom. So many topics that arise each year in the State House affect what happens every day in the schoolhouse. The WTIU News Team is committed to helping you stay up to date with the issues that affect your family's future. Keep yourself informed. Tune in to Indiana Newsdesk, your source for regional and state in-depth news.
There's never been a more important time to make sure facts and the truth are driving conversation. Washington Week is an island of civil discourse in a chaotic media environment. On Friday nights, we gather the best reporters in the nation to unpack what's really happening and have a conversation that's not about point of view, but about informing the American people.
Washington Week.
Welcome back to Indiana Newsdesk. Well, this week, the Bloomington Park Commissioners considered a proposal that would have banned the use of tents in city parks. But the idea was dismissed after the community rallied in support of those struggling with homelessness. But as Ethan Burks reports, less than 48 hours after the ruling, the city sent resource officers into parks to remove camping structures.
For the last several months, public spaces like Seminary Park have become a dwelling for people experiencing homelessness. As the cooler temperatures set in, people have set up more tents to keep warm. The city has a rule that bans overnight camping in parks, but the proposal park commissioners considered earlier this week would have banned tent camping during the day as well.
We turn to our policy manual, and oftentimes I was asked in the past couple months, what is the policy about tents in parks? And what we had in place was a special use permit.
More than 200 people joined this week's meeting to oppose the proposal.
The homeless folks are part of our community. That's why they are our responsibility. I think this is cruel and heartless, and I can't believe that we're even considering evicting folks when we have no alternatives to offer them.
In the end, the park board struck down the proposal, but only to have BPD come into Seminary Park a day later to enforce the overnight policy.
The difference was indicating to people that they shouldn't leave their stuff in the park either. And that decision was made upon the recommendation of a bunch of our folks who've been working on that issue downtown.
Hamilton says the city offered people transportation to nearby shelters, but only a few people took advantage of it.
There really isn't anywhere for people to go. If they can't stay in a public park, then their only choice is to go onto private property, which is, as you know, illegal.
White says the city and county both have availability at local shelters, but it's not nearly enough to solve the problem of people experiencing homelessness. Directors of local shelters say there are about 15 to 18 beds available at the Wheeler Mission, around 10 at Beacon's Friends Place, and 35 through the county's isolation center. And even though there is availability, there is still the looming health danger of the pandemic.
The reality is that people are staying in crowded shelter settings still, and that is an increased risk of developing COVID. And so from a COVID standpoint, it is safest to not break up encampments.
In a statement, the city says the parks were also turning into unsafe places for social gatherings. BPD reports it found hundreds of needles and syringes when it was removing items from Seminary Park. But people experiencing homelessness who may be dealing with substance abuse issues can still seek shelter because many places have low barrier requirements.
We're giving them a place to come just as they are, and in hopes that we can meet them and address their needs so that they can move from that crisis situation to stability, and from stability to stable housing eventually.
Several local shelters, and the mayor himself, admit there's still more work to be done locally, and the only way to solve the problem is to have more affordable housing. For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Ethan Burks.
Former Notre Dame law professor Amy Coney Barrett is just the second Supreme Court justice from Indiana. But what do you know about the first? Mitch Legan has more on Sherman Minton, the original Hoosier justice.
A Supreme Court justice from 1949 to 1956, Sherman Minton hailed from Floyd County and until recently was the only person chosen from the Hoosier state on the nation's highest court. But for many Hoosiers traveling south, a bridge bearing his name is how you get to Kentucky.
I mean, I used to ask my students the same thing, do you know who the bridge is named for? Some guy named Minton. I don't know, who was he?
Guggen and her husband Jim St. Clair both taught at IU Southeast for decades. Much like Floyd County historian Dave Barksdale, they took an interest in Minton, who was born to a poor family in Georgetown in 1890.
Got his early schooling in Georgetown. And then came into New Albany High School.
Growing up in poverty had a profound impact on Minton, who worked hard from a young age to support both his family and his goal of continuing his education. In 1911, Minton had enough money to enroll at IU Bloomington.
They would go pick berries, to have something to eat. I mean, it really was a poverty existence that they experienced as undergraduates.
Still, he was a stellar student-athlete there, playing baseball and football and graduating from the law school with a full ride to continue studying at Yale.
One of the significant things that happened to him at Indiana University, and that is that he became very close friends with Paul McNutt, who would later be governor and would really launch Minton's political career.
Behind me here in New Albany is the Ellsby Building, which is where Sherman Minton opened his first law practice after returning from World War I. It was in this building Minton would start a legal career that would take him to the United States Senate and eventually the Supreme Court. After reopening the practice in New Albany, Governor McNutt chose Minton to head the state's Utility Regulation Commission. Minton used his success there to catapult to a new position in 1935, Democratic senator from Indiana.
And as it turns out, Minton was seated next to Harry Truman, and that was the beginning of, a long friendship.
During his single term in the Senate, Minton became President Franklin Delano Roosevelt's right-hand man in Congress and stumped hard for the president's New Deal programs as a response to the Great Depression.
And I think that's one of the things that he tried to do in his political career, is help people who were in similar situations than that he experienced.
But the Supreme Court would rule many of the initiatives unconstitutional, which influenced Minton's view of the court and made him the #1 senator pushing the president's court-packing plan.
He said, we're not trying to pack the court, it's those 9 old men that are packing the court. They won't get off the court. And of course, that was part of Roosevelt's plan, was to get rid of any justice who was over a certain age, and that would give him more. And of course, that issue has come up again.
The court-packing plan proved unpopular, and Minton lost his bid for re-election in 1940. For his efforts on the New Deal, President Roosevelt appointed Minton to the 7th Circuit Court of Appeals. About 8 years later, a vacancy opened on the Supreme Court. And sure enough, Minton's old buddy, now President Harry Truman, was in position to fill the seat.
That was the one thing that came up for him, was his partisanship. In the same way, I think for Barrett, the one thing that's come up for her is her conservatism.
Minton's 7 years on the court were quite conservative compared to his time in the Senate because of his belief in judicial restraint. He did, however, break with his ideology as a key vote in overturning segregation in schools in Brown versus Board of Education.
Judicial restraint. It was the way he saw the role of the court, because he had lived through that New Deal experience in the Senate, striking down legislation using the Constitution. And so he came onto the court not a fan of that approach.
Kate says Justice Barrett is similar in her belief in judicial restraint and relying on settled precedent, although her originalist outlook and young age put her in the position to have a major impact on the court in the years to come.
the most immediate thing is that John Roberts no longer really controls the majority on the court in the way that he did.
Barrett's instant impact is giving the court a 6-seat conservative majority. Whether Hoosiers will name a bridge after her remains to be seen. But down in New Albany, Barrett gives educators an opportunity to discuss Floyd County's favorite son.
We want the next generations to understand, first of all, why the bridge is named what it's named, and then get into more of what he meant to the city, to the state, and to the nation.
For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Mitch Legan.
And for the first time in a century, Indiana and Purdue will not meet on the football field. The two schools mutually agreed to cancel Saturday's Old Oak and Bucket game at Memorial Stadium due to a rising number of positive COVID-19 cases within both football programs. The 8th-ranked Hoosiers will play Iowa in the Big Ten crossover games. That's on December 19th. That's the end of this program, but our work continues online as we cover the news throughout the week at WTIUnews.org. Have a great weekend.
Indiana Newsdesk is made possible in part by Smithville Fiber Internet, streaming TV, home security and automation in Southern Indiana. More information at smithville.com. MALLOR GRODNER attorneys providing legal services to clients and the community. Understanding, expertise, results. Bloomington and Indianapolis. LawMG.com. IU Alumni Association connecting IU's network of alumni and sharing the Indiana spirit through scholarships, advocacy, and volunteerism. Alumni.iu.edu. IU Center for Rural Engagement extending IU Bloomington resources to improve Hoosier lives in partnership with communities and organizations. Rural.indiana.edu. And by WTIU members. Thank you.